Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with my books beside my bed video for the week. For those of you who are new to my channel, hi, welcome, and this is what I have been reading in the last 7 days. So this reading wrap up is from the 20th to the 26th of May. I read 6 books, one of which was a picture book, about 1,890 pages, and I'm up to 90 books for the year. It was also the week of the Scallywagathon, so I completed all 4 of my challenges, which was fantastic, and then I got in a bit of extra reading as well. The first book that I read was The Young Elites by Marie Lu. This was published in 2014 by Penguin, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I read it for the Scallywag challenge, which was to read a book with a morally grey character, and as it turns out, there's a very morally grey character in this book, but ultimately, yeah, I think this book is kind of forgettable because I'm struggling to remember details of it and it's only 7 days later. The world that main character Adelina lives in is marked by those who are survivors of the blood fever and those who never had it in the first place. Adelina survived the blood fever, and the children who did often display abilities or powers, and she has never manifested any, but she has brought shame onto her family just by existing. When she is cast out, she is branded a Malfetto, and she joins forces with another group who are trying to bring about dominance of this particular group of people with abilities. Adelina is a very dark character, and I mean, I quite appreciated that. I like characters where the female characters aren't simpering and whatnot, and she's incredibly dark and quite twisted, and she's broken by the way that she's been treated in her life, and that comes across, and she's definitely morally grey. Yeah. Ultimately, the fact that I'm struggling to recall details of it just says it was an okay book. I enjoyed it while I read it. I do know that. It's probably not a series that I'm going to continue. I'm glad that I read it, glad I got to read some more of Marie Lu's work, but there are definitely other series and books that I enjoy a lot more. Then I read Starry Eyes by Jen Bennett. This was sent to me for review by the publisher Simon & Schuster. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, and this is being released on June 1st, and I adored this book. It is a young adult contemporary book. I read it for the Challenge Marooned Read a Standalone book, and I just fell in love. Former best friends Zori and Lennon are now essentially enemies after something that happened at homecoming the year prior. They find themselves on a camping trip together with a group of other friends, and then suddenly they are stranded and left to deal with being in the wild by themselves. It's really a coming of age story. It deals with how they sort out their feelings for one another, how they reconcile things that they've done in the past, and they've both done things to hurt the other person, and it's how they deal with all of this in the face of a whole lot of other stuff that's been thrown up in their face from their families and their friendship groups. And it was just really fun. It's quite a slow burn sort of young adult romance story. And I will say that if you're an adult considering buying this for a teenager, there are quite a few sexual references in it, so just beware of that going in. It actually has quite a healthy look on sex, so it's good from that perspective, but if you are wary of giving your teenager books like that, just be aware going into it or read it first. The only thing I would say is that in the middle it got a little bit slow, which is why I couldn't give it 5 out of 5 stars, but I absolutely adored it and I would highly recommend it. Then I read Ask the Passengers by A.S. King. This was published in 2012 by Little Brown. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I read it for the challenge Blow the Man Down, read a book by a female author. It follows Astrid, who is questioning her sexuality, and she enjoys lying in the backyard staring up at the sky and watching the planes that fly over her backyard. And she has started a practice of sending love to the people in the plane and asking for their help and assistance in the problems in her life. She is very misunderstood by her family, particularly her mother, who has specific expectations of her children, and Astrid doesn't fit those expectations. So she is sort of almost neglected by her mother. And her father is going through his own issues, and so there's neglect from all sides. All the while she's questioning her sexuality. She hasn't come out to anyone, and she's trying to deal with what that would mean for her and whether a label actually defines who she is. A.S. King has a wonderful way of blending in a little bit of magical realism. Astrid is taking a subject on philosophy at school, and so there's a lot of philosophy thrown in it, and she begins to see Socrates following her around and offering her advice and support, which is the magical realism element, and it was really cool. If you like that sort of contemporary with a magical realism twist, I do recommend A.S. King's works. I've got another book of hers Gloria O'Brien's History of the Future to read next month, and I'm really looking forward to it. Then I reread Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This was published originally in 1999 by J.K. Rowling. I think this edition was published in 2014. I read it for the challenge, The Treasure Map, read a book with a map in it, because there is a map of the Hogwarts ground at the start of the book. And I haven't read this book in many years. I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Overall, I'm still very average on the Harry Potter series reading it as an adult. This one I definitely did enjoy. It was nice to see the Marauders again because they were always an interesting part of the story. I would like to kick Snape out the window because he is essentially, he is an appalling excuse for a teacher. And I've said this in every video and I will continue to say it. I cannot stand him. Really enjoyed seeing Professor Lupin in this. He was always one of my favourite characters from the book series. So yes, 3.5 out of 5 stars. Everyone and their mother knows the story of this book, and besides third book if you haven't read it, I'm not spoiling it. So that was the end of my Scallywagathon TBR. Then I picked up Neverland by Margot McGovern. This is a Love Oz YA, I want to say thriller, because I think this gets mislabeled as things, and I don't even know if a thriller is quite it as well. It's a contemporary, but it gave me the same feelings as reading a thriller, or maybe just a mystery. So main character Kit has returned to Neverland, which is the island that she grew up on. Her parents have both died and her uncle has taken over governance of the island, and he is a psychiatrist and he has built an institute on the island for teenagers with mental health issues. Kit attempted suicide and so he's brought her back, except this time she's come back as a patient and she is forced to confront things in her past that she has blocked out, and she has sort of twisted with the fairy tales that her father wove for her when she was a child on Neverland. She begins to have difficulty distinguishing between the reality of her situation and fantasy world that she has built for herself to explain everything that's gone on in her life. And that was probably the most fascinating part, because the stories that she told were really intriguing. There's all Peter Pan retellings and mythical creatures, and it's really fantastically written. I absolutely adored it and I sped through it in a couple of hours and I highly recommend it. But it does leave you, as you get further in, with this sinking feeling that something really terrible happened to Kit when she was younger. And, you're not wrong, because that tension is built up. I really love this. I loved how Kit had to begin to question whether the monsters from her family island were real or whether they weren't. I love the relationship between her and her uncle, which has become really fractured because of her rebellious nature. So I highly recommend this. Also, can I just point out how gorgeous these two covers are, because they've both got the muted sort of eggplanty navy colors with gold and white, and they are simply stunning together. And then finally I read a picture book, Monsters by Anna Feinberg and illustrated by Kim Gamble and Stephen Axelson, and this was sent to me for review by Alan and Unwin, so thank you very much to them. It is about a young girl named Tildy who sees monsters everywhere once the sun goes down, and she's so frightened of them. She tries to find out if anyone else can see the monsters in her family, but they can't, and they sort of dismiss it as a childhood fantasy. Tildy becomes quite miserable until she meets a young boy from school who also sees monsters but is unafraid of them. And one day when she's playing with him at his house, she gets very frightened, and he helps her to find the right thing to do about her own monsters. It was a beautiful little story. It could be interpreted in many different ways depending on how you choose to interpret it with kids. It has very whimsical illustrations and it was absolutely just a delight to read, and I think it will be a favourite for many children. So those are the books that I read this week. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books. I'm especially interested if you have read Starry Eyes or Neverland, because I haven't seen very many people talk about them and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye guys.